The information found in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hi, and welcome to the Women in Depth podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lourdes Viado. Join me as we explore the inner lives of women, their struggles, fears, hopes, and dreams. We'll go beneath the surface and take a deeper look at what is hidden, unknown, uncertain, and uncomfortable. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. I am very excited about our guest today. Her name is Allison Lefkowitz, and Allison is the author of the Highly Sensitive Person's Toolkit: Everyday Strategies for Thriving in an Overstimulating World. And if you've been following the podcast for any amount of time, then you're aware that we've done a lot of episodes on the trait of high sensitivity. And this is important because 20% of us are highly sensitive. At least 50% of the people who find themselves in a therapy office are highly sensitive. And I think for me, the reason this is so important is that for those who are highly sensitive, so many of the struggles that they're dealing with can kind of trace back to how they're managing their lives, how they're structuring their lives, just the way that they do things. And it's important for highly sensitive people to be aware of this trait so that they can create a life that works for them. And as a therapist, as someone who is highly sensitive, my husband's highly sensitive, my son's highly sensitive, I have become intimately familiar with this trait and also see this in my clients. And I know that when you have learned about the trait and you start to make these lifestyle changes, it's interesting what happens with the anxiety, the stress. It's just a little bit easier. And of course, there can be other things going on for highly sensitive individuals that can add to the stress, but just being aware of the trait, educating yourself, and then making the lifestyle changes can make a world of difference. And so that is why I'm so passionate about educating everyone I know about this trait. And so when Allison's book came out, I was so excited and was happy that she sent me a copy. And I just think this is one of the best resources I've seen. Very concise, very helpful, very compassionately written for highly sensitive individuals. So I'm excited to welcome her to our podcast today. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice in New York City, and she specializes in working with highly sensitive people who we'll refer to as HSPs, and is the author of the Highly Sensitive Person's Toolkit: Everyday Strategies for Thriving in an Overstimulating World. It's available on Amazon and any major bookseller. You can find Allison on her website, www.almft.com, or her email, allisonlefkowitz@icloud.com. And all of this will be in our show notes so that you can find Allison and learn more about her. Hi, Allison, and welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And what a flattering intro. And I was nodding along with you as you talked about your experience of high sensitivity and your passion about it. And I'm so excited to be talking to you today. You seem very immersed, and you and I seem very aligned in sort of how we feel about the trait. And I love knowing that your husband's highly sensitive and your son, you said, is highly sensitive. That's fantastic.
It can
be. I love that. Yeah, well, yes, it can be. And then there's moments, but it can be. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, I'm always excited because I'm lucky to work with a lot of highly sensitive men as well. So anytime I hear of a man that has claimed the trait, you know what I mean? It makes me happy, and to hear that a younger person too knows about it. So I think that's wonderful.
So Allison, why did you write this book? What inspired you?
I wrote this book partly because the opportunity came to me. I always thought about writing a book, actually. I thought about some other topics, but high sensitivity was always my specialty as a therapist. And so actually the publisher came to me And, I had to go through a process to be chosen as the author as I did. But then I realized when I sat down, there was so much I had to say. And I was so grateful to have the opportunity to be able to say it in the way that I do and bring my own experience as a highly sensitive person. And then I adore my work with my highly sensitive clients and being able to share their stories. And really, in a way, too, I've been a therapist now for over 10 years and and I work more, I guess, I don't know what the right word is, like more organically, I say, like I like to work with my client. It's a process we go in together, and there's things that I've come up with that have worked along the way. And so to get that on paper and kind of have it concisely down, like, in the book, I talk about the sensitive core skills, or the skills for the highly sensitive person. And to kind of get that all together and pull it together was really also enjoying for me. So now I feel like I have a sort of a concise guide that I have now, and then other people can have too.
I am really in awe and grateful for how concise this book is, because I think, one of the things I know I experience as a highly sensitive person is sometimes I just go down that rabbit hole and continue, another article, another book, and what about this? And in your book, it's all there in a very slim volume that's not overwhelming. And even your style of writing and the way that you break things down, and that is so needed for people who are highly sensitive.
I really appreciate that. And I think not only highly sensitive, but for just humans in general. Think how complicated our lives are right now,
Yeah.
right? And I think this comes from a need. It's also, I think, reflective of my therapeutic style that I've developed over the years. And I know that I always prefer simple. And even when I was in graduate school, I don't know if you had this experience of getting these very like weighty articles, or, I worked with a young analyst for a while, and I'd go to read Young's work that I love, but it's so heavy, and you miss some stuff in sort of the way that things are explained. And I feel like life is complicated enough. The way our minds work sometimes can be complex or creative, as I like to say sometimes. And so we can really keep things soft and simple and accessible, and you can have the same results that some other more fancier way, more complicated way. I find that simple works best.
Yeah.
And especially too, in terms of highly sensitive people, because we are more prone, because of our finely tuned nervous systems, for overstimulation. And so it's probably something I, as a HSP myself, kind of organically did because it resonated and felt authentic to me. And then I find just naturally it worked with my clients. So it makes me so happy to hear that you resonate with that and you understand why I actually make the intention of making things simple and just accessible for everyone. I don't want it to be a magical mystery tour when you're trying to discover who you are. You know what I mean?
It's already complicated and difficult enough.
Yes, right. A lot of reasons for that. So I really appreciate you saying that. That means a lot.
So I want to start with the basics, because again, we may have listeners who this is their first time hearing about this trait. So I want to start with just, what does it mean to be highly sensitive?
Sure. The way that I view being a highly sensitive person is someone that experiences the world at a higher frequency. And when I say higher frequency, the way I like to think about it is kind of through our senses. So we see more, we hear more, we feel more, not just physically through our physical bodies, but we feel more emotionally. And that's a big part of the trait. We feel a lot of empathy for other people. And again, it is beautiful to experience the world at this frequency, to take everything in, which can be beautiful and joyous and, feelings of ecstasy. And then the other side of the coin, is that things can affect us. We take in more information, so we can take in some of, I don't want to say negative necessarily, but unhelpful or overstimulating information.
Yeah, I think that just is a really good description of what it feels like with the experiences of being highly sensitive. And I think what you described makes sense, that two areas that HSPs struggle with are overstimulation and intense emotions, because there's just so much that we're taking in and that has to be processed. And unless we're aware of it, we don't have any filters or boundaries. It's just all coming in.
Yes, exactly. And then the other piece around, I think the statistic is about 30% of HSPs are also empaths. And so I feel like for us, it's sort of, especially with the emotional piece, I don't know what the research is exactly about how much we take in emotionally, but with that consideration as well, having an awareness of our emotional selves and how to manage that and, regulating our own emotions is really important.
Allison, could you talk a little bit more about that? About what does it mean to be an empath, and how do you make that discernment between high sensitivity and being an empath? Because again, I think sometimes they're thrown around together, and I want our listeners to know the difference.
Absolutely. Well, first I'll say, well, let me say this first. Yes, learning about ourselves is important, but identifying exactly what our labels are, I'll say if it's important for you to know you're an empath, great, go down that path, explore. If it doesn't matter to you that much, then don't bother with it. I like to say that just because we could get caught up in labels. So I was going to preface with that. But the difference, I think, between or how to differentiate an empath versus an HSP would be, I think, the way, let's see, we take on, because an empath is someone that also can feel other people's emotions and also can physically experience other people's emotions. And I find in my experience, because I'm both, and then also for my clients that are also HSPs and empath, they also get like physical symptoms from other people. And so that to me is sort of the biggest indicator. It's not so much that we also have strong emotions or react strongly to other people, but then we can also pick up on other people's emotions and actually really feel them or physically feel them. Like if I'm very close to someone sometimes and they have a stomach ache, I might have a little stomach ache as
Yeah.
well. So it kind of shows up in how we feel into another person's experience. And for those clients, and even for me, sometimes when we pick up on that, one of the things I teach clients is sort of how to separate those out. Like what's mine and what actually belongs to somebody else. How can I hand that back to you? Or how can I help process that or energetically, just gently give those emotions or that experience or that pain back to someone else? So that I just wanted to name that as well. That's an important part of telling the difference and then also working with it.
So in your book, you go into these 9 core skills for HSPs. And then when you do that, you describe the skill set and how to practice, which I think, again, I just love how you have organized this. It just makes me so happy and excited.
Oh, I'm
Um,
so glad. Yes, I love that. Yes, because can I tell you why I did that?
yeah,
Because
of course.
I actually wasn't a huge fan of self-help books myself. I was like, because a lot of time I'd read them and I'd be like, meh, like I've read a few, believe me, that have been helpful, more on the spiritual side, but I'm like, a lot of times I don't know what to do because that's how I work with my clients. It's like, okay, here's the skill, but how do we practice? And
Yeah.
so a lot of the practice are real examples of either I've done or my clients have done. So I really appreciate that, and I bet as a therapist, you understand that too, that it's not just telling the
Yes.
client to do something, but how do they incorporate it into their life?
I think a lot of times information, support, books, they stop at insight, right? You can get an understanding, but then what do you do?
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So I know that you can't go into all 9 of the course core areas right now, but I wanted to touch on the first one, the
Yeah.
self-advocacy and self-parenting, just because
Yes.
this is a big one. This is a big deal. Spend so
Mhm.
much time on this area as a
Mhm.
therapist. And so I love that it was also the one you put first. And so I was wondering if you can kind of take us through this core skill and through the skill set and in practice, just to give our listeners a taste of what the book is like.
Oh, I would love to. Absolutely. I'm excited to. Do you want me to give the example from the book or I can give another example?
Whatever you want to do.
Why don't I give the example from the book? Because I really like it, because I feel like it sort of encompasses that skill. So the skill, and again, it's the number one skill in the book because it is the number one skill I feel that highly sensitive people can benefit from, because being a highly sensitive person, or again, any human, especially if we have not had parents, caregivers, anyone that has not been able to understand us, intuit our needs, help us discover our own needs and how we want to take care of ourselves. Sometimes this is something we need to work on. And I certainly know I had to work on it and continuously work on it as a human and as a highly sensitive person. So the skill set, I break it down into sort of 5 pieces. The first one is asking. I know this seems simple, but asking can be a skill that we need to work on. So asking what we need to feel comfortable, to feel safe, to feel grounded, and then to receive what we need to feel comfortable, safe, and grounded. Another piece of this is, again, thinking like you being your own parent or you being your own advocate, being the skill of developing and nurturing self-curiosity. And this is important because this is what a good attuned parent does for a child growing up. They help a child discover who they are by asking questions, by being attuned. And so it's really about doing that for ourselves. So it can be just about, again, attuning ourselves to the present moment. How am I today? How am I feeling? Because some of us don't really stop, especially with the pace of everything is going right now, is being able to say, how am I actually doing today? Just checking in. How does my body feel? How does the soul feel? And I feel this is an important one for HSPs because we have this deep inner world. Another piece of self-parenting and advocacy, and very important that I emphasize a lot through the book, is the practice of self-compassion. This is really the practice and acknowledgement that you wish yourself well, that you want to treat yourself well, and that you want to take care of yourself. And even when you mess up, you still be able, just like a good parent would, like if you messed up on a test or something and you felt bad and you brought it to your parent and you were crying, they would say, it's okay, honey, I still love you. It's fine. So sort of that practice. And then the last one, again, an important one that I touch on in the book and I talk to later on, I actually address this again and give kind of a practice in the self-care section or the health section, is bringing awareness to the internal dialogue that you have. So how are you talking to yourself? Am I talking kindly, or am I talking in a critical way? And again, the first piece is just kind of being aware of that. So not only am I asking and receiving for what I want, I'm being curious about myself, I'm practicing self-compassion. I'm also, and this is an important part, which again, we build on in the book, and there's a later section with an exercise that you could do if you really have a hard time with this, but being aware of that internal dialogue. So how does your internal parent talk to you, right?
Yeah. For me, all of these skills are like, to me, the foundation or building block of therapy.
Absolutely.
This is what we spend a lot of time on in the beginning part of therapy, just laying this foundation.
Absolutely.
And I just love that you have that all under self-parenting and self-advocacy, because this is really just about giving yourself what you need, also what you didn't receive. I mean, there's so much in this part right here. And so I just love how you put that together.
Oh, thank you. I got some help too. So this wasn't all me. And this is a lot of work and a lot of time. I'm a combination of all the people that help me. So
Well, this is interesting is when you read the skill set, it seems so simple, but each of these is a lot of work. I mean,
it is, right? Yes.
I mean, just asking for what you need to feel comfortable, safe, and grounded. Well, first, you have to know what you need to feel safe, comfortable, and grounded. And then comes, but if I ask, then what? There's just so much here. And I just love that you're able to simplify it. There's so much behind each of these skills.
You're making me think of one sort of frustrated Amazon review I wrote, and someone was criticizing this, and they're saying like, well, this doesn't help. This isn't enough. And I'm like, I know. I know it's not. My hope is you practice this, or you bring it to your therapist, and you can work on it together. And so that's part of the reason I'm even thankful to be talking to you about this right now, because there's, you're limited in a book. You can only translate so much.
Well, you could have written a whole book on self-parenting and a whole chapter on each of these skill sets easily.
Oh, yeah.
With a workbook and with meditations and books and other books to read. That's how much is here. And so I love that this is an excellent outline or a guide of steps to take. Yeah. And then, you can now take those further and take those deeper.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was writing this was a lot longer. Like, cause
I
I,
bet it
and
was.
yeah, and actually the skill sets weren't even a part of the book. I added it because my publisher that I was working with sort of had an outline idea of what they wanted me to discuss, sort of also the way they work, sort of based on what people were looking for. And I said, we have to add these skills in here because there's no point in me giving you advice if, telling you how to handle yourself at work if you're terrified to ask your boss.
Yeah.
Also, I do a lot of work with trauma, all kinds of trauma, big trauma, little traumas. And so when I'm referring to big T and little t traumas. And so I find, again, these are the skills that come up over and over and over again. And so I felt I would have been doing a disservice to everyone if I did not include these things. So again, it makes me so happy you see the value in this and see the richness in this. And again, I hope someone is able to go, oh, I can't ask for what I want. Well, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Why can't I do that? What's going
Yeah.
on? So
And I'm glad you brought up the trauma. And you mentioned this in the book with the vantage sensitivity. And I talk to my clients about this all the time that, one of the, I guess the shadow and light part of being highly sensitive is when you've had an attuned, supportive, safe, grounded childhood and,
mm-hmm,
early experience, you
mm-hmm.
really, really thrive. You really
Yes.
blossom. It's just amazing. And the flip side of that is if you don't, it really affects you deeply.
It does. But what I want to just say to people is even if you did not get it in your childhood, you can create a whole new life as an adult and have yourself thrive. Like, again, this is coming from my own experience. Me at whatever, 15 years old would think I'd be sitting talking to you about a book that I published during a pandemic. No, but you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
because I've worked on all these things myself. You touched on something that's a big topic is that even if you have a trauma history, and I say this in the book, it is possible to heal and to get better. You don't have to carry this forever because I feel like I see examples of that people that are traumatized and like that, they think like kind of that's it. And I have to live my life like this.
Absolutely. The brain is an amazing thing. There's neuroplasticity. We're always creating new connections. And it's just about taking those steps to learn and understand and move forward.
Yeah, I talk about neuroplasticity all the time because my clients come in, they're like, that's it. I'm hopeless. We just got to plan around my sensitivity. I'm like, hold up.
No, no, we
Hold
don't.
up. We got other things to do. So
Yeah,
awesome.
you have a lot
Awesome.
of
Awesome.
other things you can do.
Yes, there's so much we can access. If we just like you said, have, someone with us that's attuned, we get to a place of safety and then all these beautiful things can happen once, we're out of that place of trauma and can start to work with it.
So, Allison, I'm just being mindful of our time. So, I wanted to go ahead and talk about the different sensitive styles that you mentioned. And this is related to kind of determining your optimal level of stimulation. So, can you share a little bit more about what does that mean when you talk about your optimal level of stimulation? And then, if you could share a little bit about the different styles. I really found this very helpful because I don't see this a lot where you pull all the styles together and you can kind of see what they are.
Yeah, and the interesting about the styles is this was new information for me as I was doing research for the book. Because this is not part of, as far as I can tell, Elaine Aron's research. I got this from, oh, bear with me. What is this person's name? I don't have the name in front of me, but why don't we put it in the show notes? But what I really want to emphasize is this is not part of Elaine Aron's research, but this is some research about HSPs, also about people that are gifted, have a sort of a different type of style for being in the world. So there are 5 types, and I'll just list them at first. So they are emotional, imaginational, intellectual, psychomotor, and sensual. Ooh. So I gotta make room for jokes. We're in a serious profession, right? I gotta make jokes somewhere.
Yes.
And so really the types of sensitive styles, like the names kind of are the description, sort of tell the description of it. So the emotional HSP is going to be more connected to their emotions. The imaginal HSP is someone, I guess the best description would be someone that has a strong relationship to their imagination. So like writers, poets, filmmakers, comedians, anything like that. People that like to hang out in their subconscious a lot, their fantasies a lot. These are people that really like, fantasy dream world stuff of not of this earth. The next type, intellectual. And these are the types that are really the deep reflective thinkers. These are the really good problem solvers. They have a really deep desire for truth and logic, things like that. They're also, as children, they're the ones that are more likely to ask, like, why? It's kind of these people that really are the seekers of knowledge. The psychomotor, these are the HSPs that are the more physical types. So they have, and I think this would kind of maybe cross over into high sensation seeking people a little bit, because they're the ones that like adrenaline a bit more, like new experiences, and especially physical ones. These are the ones that love like intense physical activity. They can sometimes be gifted athletes. Also, their high sensitivity can come into play because, really, really good athletes are also good at noticing details. If you think about it, like a good tennis player, a good football player, they know to move maybe half an inch, so it's going to show up in that way. And then the last one is the sensual one. And these people exist in a world basically where all five senses are enhanced. So these can be people that get extreme pleasure, but also overstimulation. So this is my sense that these might be people that are also musicians. Maybe they love art, food, things like that. But this is also a population, I imagine, that would be more prone to types of addictions, because if we think about it, part of an addictive quality or addictive habit forms because something feels so good. And then if we pair it, with somebody that maybe needs to feel good for whatever reason, what's happened to them, that they might develop into an addiction.
It's so helpful just understanding how you could go to an extreme, or also to know what the remedy is, how to kind of balance yourself out with this.
Yes, exactly. Really, the question is, how do I work? What brings me pleasure and what gives me great joy, which again is another skill that I touch on. And then what's difficult for me? And then how do I find balance between those two? Because sometimes too, another trait of highly sensitive people is that we can get really wrapped up in something or very intensely get into something. And that can be great, but sometimes we've got other things to do. So sometimes how to, know that about ourselves. Like, all right, I'm going to sit down and listen to this album that I love, but I know if I hear a new album, I get into it, I might want to listen to it a couple of times, and then I'm going to forget to take out the garbage, right? So let me make a note to put a timer on my phone so I remember to take the garbage out so it's not sitting in my apartment or whatever. Again, it's not a positive or negative. It's just really the big question is, how do I work?
Yeah. I just really love these 2 pages, and look at you putting all of this in 2 pages. That's amazing. Actually, it's more like a page and a half, because one is about high sensation.
Yes, I had really good editors because I'm a wordy gal, and so they helped me cut it down.
Well, I just feel like, this is an area, these 5 styles or types really just help us as HSPs understand ourselves more and why we do what we do. And also you can see the nuances between HSPs.
Yes. Thank you for saying we are all very different. We are not all the same. I feel like I don't know why I feel the need to say that slowly and clearly, because I see this sort of archetype of HSP floating around on the internet. I've seen it on a lot of Facebook message boards that I've had to just unhook from, because someone will write like, I'm having a feeling, I must be highly sensitive. And I'm like, oh, no.
Yes.
We're all incredibly different and have different energies. So I appreciate you saying that too, because I hate this idea that, I saw it was someone, they were trying to bring awareness to high sensitivity. And the quote from the person was, oh, when I go to a party, like there's bright lights and noises and I have to sit down. And I'm like, must we use this quote? Like this, can we talk about something else? Like, there's much more to us than just bright lights and loud noises, and we don't like them sometimes. Like, that's not a full description. So
Yeah.
yes, clearly I have a lot of passion about this piece.
Well, I think that with this part right here, there's a beautiful blend of the simplicity, but also the depth. It's like you see the complexity here, but you also see the simplicity, and there's value here. Just, as I'm reading these, I was thinking about, my husband, my son, seeing myself, seeing clients, and going, wow, this just really is such helpful information for, sometimes we struggle with ourselves about certain aspects, like, why do I do that? Or this is so strange. why can't I remember my keys ever?
Yeah. Oh my God. My husband and I have this, it's a running joke. And the running joke is I play this game every day. It's where's my ex? And so X is always different. And so it's where's my it's usually my sunglasses, my phone, my earphones or something. And I'm like, and I come out and, because, we're working still in our apartment. I come out, I'm like, it's time for that game again. And he's like, I'm like, where's my blah? And then he helps me find it.
Play that game here too.
I'll tell him that. That'll make him feel better. Great.
But yeah, this is wonderful. In your work with your clients and your own experience and in writing this book, what has surprised you most about this trait, about people with this trait?
That we are incredibly strong people. I have seen such strength from, and I mean, I would say, I write this in the intro and I hate to tout myself, but from myself, like I was finishing up this book and editing it as the pandemic started. I was literally in the middle of meeting that deadline and figuring out how to put my practice online and talk to all my clients. And I was like, woo. And I mean, I've had other points of that, but I'm like, all right, I am a strong person. And then also I think of so many of my clients that have had tremendous traumas, that have gone through, I can't even tell you how many things, and they are still the most amazing, strong, soulful people that I've ever met. I'm in awe of a lot of my clients when they sit down and really tell me their histories. And I'm like, I'm amazed you're sitting across and talking to me right now. So there is incredible strength that we carry. Just because we feel a lot, we experience a lot, does not mean we're not strong. It's just we're in a society, a culture that does not understand it. And so that's why I feel so passionate about it, especially right now. Think of all the, examples we have of what strength looks like and how disruptive and how toxic that's been for our society.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's so important to help people recognize that yes, you are sensitive, but there is a deep strength that you carry. And I find for a lot of people that are HSPs, they're very wise people. They have gifts that they can bring. They have intangible gifts. And so I just feel like it's so important to give people a voice, to tell people, share my experience, piece of my experience, my other clients. So it's just so important, especially for this moment in time that we're in, this sort of messy time that I believe is sort of leading to a lot of healing. And I'm seeing it already in my clients. I should have asked for permission today. If I could tell, even today in the sessions I had today, I could tell you so many good things about the beautiful work all my sensitive clients are doing.
I'm with you. I've always said for a long time that some of the strongest people I know are people in therapy. I think sometimes there's this misconception that you go to therapy because you're a mess, you're crazy, you're weak, you're broken. And actually, I feel like the people who go to therapy are actually the strongest souls, because this takes a lot of strength and courage and endurance to do deep work of therapy. It's not easy.
Yes, I agree with you 1,000%. Like I use this, the Yiddish word of chutzpah. I tell my clients, I'm like, you got to have a lot of chutzpah to sit on this couch and keep coming back. Like people don't realize it. And I'll say, this is why people say therapy doesn't work. It's wrong because it's work. You're working when you're there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Allison, thank you so much for spending this time with me today and sharing about your book. And I love hearing your passion and your deep insights about this trait and about the clients that you work with. And I know that many listeners are going to really benefit from our conversation. If there's a listener who wants to learn more about you, get in touch with you, buy your book, what are the best ways that they can do that?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon, or if you don't like Amazon, any other major bookseller. I think you could even, I think it's possible to order a book if you have a local bookstore that you love, see if they can order it. So that's the easiest way. And then to reach me, again, my website is almft.com. Just to let you know, it's in the middle of a makeover. I've got my fabulous web designer on it right now because with the book, we're adding some things. So just to let you know about that. And then you can also just send me an email, which is AllisonLefkowitz@iCloud.com. So those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
And Allison will be sure to put all of that in our show notes. And again, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so excited about your book, and I just wish you well with all your future endeavors.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thanks so much for listening to the Women in Depth podcast. I hope it brings you a deeper understanding of yourself and others, and that you found some insights that illuminated and inspired. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting Women in Depth with a one-time or recurring donation. Any amount is appreciated and helps us continue to provide free, quality content for the world. If donating resonates with you, you can find the donation link on today's show notes. You can also follow Women in Depth on Facebook and YouTube, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe on iTunes. Again, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.